I want to start with a reading from a book that I love, a favorite of mine, See No Stranger by Valerie Kaur. Valerie Kaur is a Sikh American. She is a civil rights lawyer and activist, and this book is quite lovely. I'll make sure that we put it in the newsletter so you can have the title of the book. She writes, "Our minds are primed to see the world in terms of us and them." Our minds are primed to see the world in terms of us and them. We can't help it. The moment we look upon another person's face, our minds discern in an instant whether or not they are one of us, part of our family or community or country, or one of them. This happens before conscious thought. Our bodies release hormones that prime us to trust and listen to those that we see as a part of us and fear and resent them. It is easier to feel empathy and compassion for one of us, much harder for one of them. When one of us does something bad, and we do, right? People that we love are messy and misbehave. When one of us does something bad, we tend to attribute it to circumstance. But when one of them does the same, we attribute it to essence. That's just how they are. We think of us as complex and multidimensional. We tend to think of them as simple and one-dimensional. Nod your heads. You know what I'm talking about. We do this. We are much more likely to intervene when we see a victim of violence as a part of us. We tend to stand by when we see them as harmed, whether by policies of the state or violence in the street. In other words, who we see as one of us determines who we let inside our circle of care and concern. Ouch. That feels like an indictment. Our theme this month is the gifts of pluralism. And I want to talk about a couple of kinds of pluralism today and what it means as Unitarian Universalists, as members of this congregation who are trying to create a new way in the world to think about these issues of pluralism. And we have short time, so I'm just going to skim the top. We could do this for a long time. There are really two kinds of pluralism to talk about. One is that we live in a pluralistic society, and the other is religious pluralism. So let me talk just a moment about pluralistic society and what that means, because we are all citizens. We are, many of us, deeply engaged in civic life, and civic life gives us heartburn these days. And so how do we think about this? A pluralistic society is one where multiple groups with unique ideologies and values work collaboratively, we hope, to influence government policies and are active in the governing process. Groups in a pluralistic society can be determined by culture or religion or common ideologies or values. So we might call the most forward-facing part of pluralistic society the lobbyist society. There's the gun lobby and there's the anti-gun lobby. There's the pro-choice lobby and the anti-choice lobby. There's the education, there's public education and private education. People who come with different values, who try to influence government in ways that get their values across. Of course, in a healthy society, we can come with all kinds of different values and reach some kind of healthy conclusion. We are in an unhealthy society, so that it's all us versus them. That is a challenging place to live. And you say to me, and people say to me all over, what despair we feel for the state of our democracy. democracy, our democracy, rests on being a pluralistic society. And we are in despair because they want to take it apart. Ooh, that's hard. If I think, so that is where out of many one come from, right? Out of many one. That's our national motto. Religious pluralism is a different idea. It has to do with the state of being where every individual in a religiously diverse society has basic rights, freedoms, and safety to worship or not, according to their conscience. Both of these are constitutional ideas. They're legalistic ideas, but I want to bring it to what it means to us. We are gathered out of many, many different ideas, and everyone in this country should be able to worship as they choose, as long as they don't hurt other people in doing it, right? I can't tell the Lutherans or the Catholics or anybody else how they should worship. I can say that I don't think that their theology should run the country, right? So that's a little bit of the difference. Everybody should be able to worship as they want, including us, right? We get to meet and gather as we want to. Nobody tells us that we have to pray or we have to say certain words in our new member ceremony. We get to make it up. We have congregational polity, and we get to make it up. What does it mean for us as a congregation and a member of the Unitarian Universalist Association to think about religious pluralism? The way I learned it when I became a UU, and the way we often teach it to our children, is that each of us and each religion has a piece of the truth. We have, is it here that we have the golden rule and from many different, maybe that's in the back. We used to have a wall hanging that spoke about the golden rule and how it was a feature of almost every religion. I don't agree with a lot from some other religions, but if I am curious enough, pluralism, religious pluralism, calls us to curiosity. It calls us to say, somebody else may know something I don't. Even them. May know something that I don't. May have a way of being enlivened by values that I want to understand or can respect if I can get off my own high horse about knowing it all. I think for many of us who are come-outers of other religious communities, and we disagreed with what they said and it didn't fit for us anymore, which is fine. I'm glad that we can come out and move among religious streams. As long as we don't then close that part of the mind that says, that's them. They have no value for me anymore. One of the most important things that happened in my own spiritual maturity was making peace with my fundamentalist upbringing. I don't want to worship there anymore. Their theology doesn't fit me. But it doesn't do me any good to just be mad about it. It doesn't do me any good to just be mad about it. Now, you've heard me say this before. Religious abuse is a real thing. And I think especially for people who grew up in denominations that shamed people for their sexuality, that is a real deal and shouldn't be glossed over. I think Christian nationalism should be called out as but I don't think that's theology. I think that's political power. It's a political organizing tool. I don't think it's theology. If we think about diversity as a fact, we are a diverse country. There are these folks and these folks and these folks and them and us. And diversity is a fact. Pluralism is engagement. Pluralism is curiosity and engagement. Psychologist Mick Cooper says pluralism is not easy. It's a constant willingness to self-challenge and look at where we might be wrong or limited, even with regard to pluralism itself. It requires a capacity to detach ourselves from our agendas, our beliefs and our commitments, and to recognize that there may be other ways. And also it requires us to recognize that we can never wholly achieve that. We have to join in collaboration with others. We little bitty. Both as a congregation, I mean, we're mighty, but we're not enormous. And that is true also for any idea that we have. We do not have to change the world on our own. We are stronger when we join with other people who may not share exactly the same idea, but we can find some values in common. I think that's the beauty of pluralism, and it requires humility and curiosity. To see the other side, Eboo Patel says, to defend another person, not despite your tradition, but because of it, is the heart of pluralism. To defend other people, not in spite of your tradition, but because of it, is the heart of pluralism. Now, I really get tangled up here because I think we are open-minded and they are not. We can be open-minded all day long, and curious and courageous and humble and wanting to create common cause, but they are not interested. And in some cases that's true. So we close up and think, okay, well fine, we don't have to be in conversation. Okay, you do you. I think that pluralism, as we might learn to practice it here, is an ethic for living together in a diverse society. It's not mere tolerance, but it's a real encounter of commitments. So sometimes I hear in our Unitarian Universalist spaces, well, people who have a more traditional God concept or want a more traditional religion, they can go somewhere else. There are lots of places for them to go. This is the only place that I can come. And there may be a ring of truth to that, but it speaks to being closed off as opposed to what might be the energy that someone else brings in here. And I tell you, you are more diverse, we are more diverse in theological outlook than you may assume. There are a number of people in this room who would describe themselves as atheist or agnostic, many who would describe themselves as humanist, and there are many who would describe themselves as theist, as spiritual, who have an active prayer life. And because that is true for some, doesn't mean that they're wrong or that I have to join them in that. I get to decide on my own theological path and spirituality. But I want you to recognize that we are quite theologically diverse in this room. And I appreciate that we say our mission statement in that new member ceremony that talks about our willingness to be together as a theologically diverse people who are joined by some values. I think a lot, and I've said this before, about our coming here together to practice how we want the world to be. To create within our community here, how we want the world to be. As you all know, I'm a confirmed 12-stepper, and I'm very comfortable with the notion of a higher power as defined as a power greater than myself. Thank goodness I do not have to solve the problems of the world. By definition, this is a power greater than myself. My meeting, my whatever group, my family, whatever constituency we are talking about is a power greater than myself and helps me get right-sized in that. So if we want to practice in here how we want the world to be outside, I am drawn again and again to the words of Kendall Gibbons that I think I shared with you in January in her work on spiritual maturity. And I think if pluralism is an engagement with diversity, it leads us to spiritual maturity. She says, this is the kind of person I want to become, finally. Self-aware, reverent, real, strong, compassionate, graceful, humble, loyal, faithful, interdependent, at peace with my mortality, and fluent in the language of the Spirit. Embracing the gift of pluralism, believing that each one of us has a piece of the truth. Each one of us, and in fact, dadgummit, each one of them has a piece of the truth, has worth and dignity, helps me become fluent in the language of the Spirit. May it be so, and blessed be.